A man kneels in the dirt on a reality show filmed in Honduras, soaked, exhausted, weeks into a competition that has stripped away almost everything comfortable in his life. Another contestant stands over him during a formal vote and calls him slow, sluggish, clumsy. Here is what almost nobody in that room knows. This man once raced wheel to wheel with Valentino Rossi and beat him by a margin smaller than a blink. A margin so small it very nearly changed the outcome of an entire MotoGP World Championship. He became a world champion himself, not once, but twice, on two different continents, in two different decades. His fiercest American rival once called him the hardest rider he ever had to beat in a straight fight. None of that is a lie. Almost none of it is what shows up when people look him up today. This was never a punchline waiting to happen. Months after being voted off that show, he said something unexpected, that he had recovered a piece of himself he thought he had lost 5 years earlier. His name is Toni Elias. He was never forgotten because he lacked greatness. He was forgotten because nearly every time he became great, it happened somewhere else, in front of somebody else's cameras, told to audiences who never saw the whole picture at once. So how does a man who did all of that end up on his knees in the dirt being called slow? Rewind 20 years and follow every place his story went missing. Before Estoril, before any of it, he grew up in Manresa, a small city outside Barcelona. His parents worked constantly, so did his sister. Years later, he would describe those days simply. His family took on any job available, however strange, just to bring a little money home. He started racing at 17 in the 125 cubic centimeter class, third overall the following season, then up to 250 cubic centimeters, fourth, third, fourth again, across 3 straight years. Always inside the top 4, never once at the very top. This was not a rider people overlooked because he was slow. He was fast enough to matter every single season. He simply never won the one result that makes a name impossible to forget. Then came one October afternoon, the one moment nobody in the stands could look away from. October the 15th, 2006, Estoril on the Portuguese coast. The penultimate round of one of the tightest MotoGP title fights in years, one race still to come after this one. Nobody in the stands that afternoon expects this particular race to be the one people still argue about, 2 decades later. Lap 5, Dani Pedrosa tries to pass his own Repsol Honda teammate Nicky Hayden, the man leading the championship. He brakes too hard, his rear wheel lifts off the ground, then slams back down. He cannot stop the bike in time. Both riders go down together. Hayden is out of the race entirely. Hayden would later say it just hurt, that he had fitted a harder tire for the left-handers and could not believe how comfortable he felt in the opening laps. With the points leader gone, Valentino Rossi moves into the championship lead for the first time all season, and the race has not even reached halfway. Now the final lap. Toni Elias is fighting Rossi and Kenny Roberts Jr. for a win that, at this point, still looks like Rossi's to lose. Into the last corner. Elias dives inside. Rossi fights back. Roberts gets squeezed out entirely. 2 motorcycles, side by side, drag racing for the line, neither one giving an inch. 0.02 of a second. Elias wins. He would call it simply a very hard race. Rossi, gracious in defeat, tells reporters well done to him for a hard-fought first win. Here is what almost nobody adds to that sentence. After this race, Rossi leads Hayden by 8 points. 2 weeks later at the final round in Valencia, Rossi crashes, remounts and limps home 13th. Hayden finishes 3rd. Final tally, Hayden 252 points, Rossi 247, 5 points. An entire season decided by 5 points. Run the numbers again, slowly. If Elias had finished 2nd instead of 1st that afternoon at Estoril, Rossi collects 5 more points that day. His final total becomes 252, exactly Hayden's total, dead even. 1 rider, 1 corner, and a world championship nearly ends in an outright tie. Say the words MotoGP 2006 out loud to any fan today, and 2 names come back immediately. Rossi, Hayden. Not the man who made the difference between a champion and a tie. That is the first time history took what he built and handed the credit somewhere else. It will not be the last. Ask Elias about Rossi today, and he still believes something specific. He says Rossi still has Estoril stuck in his heart, that Rossi has never forgiven him, that Rossi is simply too competitive to ever let it go. Ask Rossi the same question, and he corrects the record entirely. He says he was never angry about losing in Portugal. The real anger, he says, comes from being knocked down in the first corner at the Spanish Grand Prix, months earlier that same year, at Jerez, a crash that cost him points he would later miss. Two men, one grudge, and they cannot even agree on which afternoon it actually happened. The two incidents sit barely 6 months apart, in the same turbulent season, but only one of them ever became a story people still repeat. Whatever the real cause, the following season did not go the way a maiden MotoGP winner's next season is supposed to go. At Assen, in June of 2007, Elias crashes hard in the opening practice session and breaks his left femur. He aims to return within 7 weeks. He misses race after race instead. Later that year, in Turkey, Rossi publicly complains that Elias rode dangerously against him, passing him on the inside and cutting back across his line more than once. The win that should have launched a legend instead becomes something smaller. One afternoon, replayed on highlight reels, disconnected from everything that comes after it. Rossi remains the sport's center of gravity. Elias slides toward its edges. He never got slower. He just stopped being the one people were watching. If you think that is where this ends, one injury, one fading name, keep watching. What comes next breaks that assumption completely. So was Elias actually finished? No. 4 years after Estoril, in 2010, a brand new category launches, Moto2. Elias wins the very first world championship the class ever holds. He clinches it with 3 rounds still remaining, at Sepang, in Malaysia. Before the season even started, he had survived a heavy crash in testing. When he crosses the line as champion, Elias breaks down completely. He would later say that seeing his team at the edge of the track with the championship flag made him cry, that his dream had become real. He thought of his uncle, who had died 4 years earlier, who once told him he would be watching from the sky the day Elias became a world champion. And he said something else. To win this title, he first had to lose 2 others, in the 125 class back in 2001, and in the 250 class in 2003. All of that losing, he said, made him stronger. Team boss Fausto Grassini calls it a memorable and fantastic day, a dream realized with a brilliant Toni Elias. Crash.net's own review of the season describes his title as a textbook mix of speed and consistency, noting he was never once outside the top 10 across the first 15 rounds. Call it a smaller stage if you want. It is still a real world championship. MotoGP just happens to sit above it, on every broadcast, every headline. And it is not even the biggest thing he built. Somewhere almost no MotoGP fan was watching, he built something even bigger. He did not stop winning, he simply started winning somewhere else. In 2016, Elias moves to the United States, signing with Yoshimura Suzuki to race MotoAmerica Superbike, a series most European fans could not name a single rider from. He is 33 years old, arriving on tracks he has never seen before, against a field that has raced together for years. On bikes, some of them have ridden since childhood. In his very first season, he still finishes 3rd overall, only 7 points behind the champion. The next year, 2017, he is untouchable. 10 race wins, 18 podium finishes. He never once finishes worse than 2nd place across the entire season. His fiercest rival of that era, Cameron Beaubier, still talks about how hard it was to race him. Beaubier says Elias was so good on the brakes that he simply maximized everything the Suzuki did well, and that beating him in a straight fight was never easy. Elias finishes runner-up again in 2018, and again in 2019. That second finish deserves its own pause. He arrives at the final round, at Barber, 16 points clear at the top of the standings. He needs almost nothing to win the title. Instead, he finishes 3rd, then 4th, while Beaubier wins both remaining races outright. The championship slips away by exactly 5 points. 5 points. The same number that once decided whether a season in 2006 ended with a champion or a tie. By the time he is done racing in America, he will have won more than 30 races and stood on more than 60 podiums. None of it happens in front of the audience that first met him at Estoril. American racing broadcasts barely reach European or Asian MotoGP fans. To them, this entire chapter, the dominant title, the near misses, the 5-point collapse, simply never aired. He was not a MotoGP rider fading out, taking easy money somewhere smaller. He was a genuine champion, building an entire second act of greatness, on a stage that most of the people who once knew his name were never watching. What happens when the world has moved on, but the rider has not completely let go? At the end of 2020, Elias announces his retirement. Suzuki's own farewell message calls him exactly what the numbers already proved. Its vice president of sales, Kerry Graber, says that from his immediate championship success on the brand new GSX R1000 to how he raised the level of everyone around him, Elias brought enormous value to Suzuki's racing effort in America. Retirement does not stick. Within months, Kyle Wyman, a fellow MotoAmerica racer, invites him back onto a bike for a single weekend. The reason has nothing to do with chasing more trophies. Elias simply wants one race his own children can watch him compete in. One weekend turns into a full season, then another. He races on for a few more years, moving between teams, never quite the same overwhelming force he was in 2017, but still fast enough to matter, still fast enough to podium. Then, in June of 2023, in the middle of a race weekend at Road America, he simply stops. "Today is my last dance," he says. "My last race." He is careful about the reason. It is not about the bike, he explains. It is about how you feel, your brain, your heart, your own thoughts. This time, nothing pulls him back. By now, MotoGP itself is not what erases him anymore. The sport had already moved on to newer names years earlier. What lingers instead is something quieter, a man who kept circling back to a helmet and a bike, trying to work out exactly what was left of him once winning, no longer defined the answer. Play it back. Estoril, 2006, decided by 0.02 of a second. Take that gap away, and the math is not close. It is dead even. 252 points to 252. A tie for the ages that never gets to exist because of him. He becomes a world champion in Moto2, a real one, just standing under MotoGP's shadow. He becomes a champion again in America, on tracks most of Europe never turns the television on for. He keeps racing for years after he first says he is done, because his own children deserve one weekend to watch him. So what actually erased Toni Elias? Not Rossi, not Hayden, not Moto2, not America, not retirement, certainly not a lack of results. His career was simply too scattered, across too many stages, too many countries, too many separate chapters, for any single audience to ever hold the whole thing at once. Which brings us back to a man on his knees in the dirt, in Honduras, being called slow. Maybe that word was never really about speed at all. Maybe it was just the sound of one more audience meeting him for the first time, with no idea how much they had already missed.